Well, we come to another pivotal moment where just as God is calling out his people and establishing a covenant with them, they're down the mountain breaking that covenant and messing everything up. I love, in the version we're reading today, God cries out, they're ruining everything. So we see Moses, the mediator, the man of God, and Aaron, the high priest, who's supposed to be mediating God to the people. And these two characters, along with God and the people, at play here. Let's dive in. Exodus 32, 1 through 14. The people saw that Moses was taking a long time to come down from the mountain. They gathered around Aaron and said to him, "Come on, make us gods who can lead us. As for this man Moses, who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we don't have a clue what has happened to him." Aaron said to them, "All right, take out the gold rings from the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." So all the people took out the gold rings from their ears and brought them to Aaron. He collected them and tied them up in a cloth. Then he made a metal image of the bull calf. And the people declared, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf. Then Aaron announced, "Tomorrow will be a festival to the Lord." They got up early the next day and offered up entirely burnt offerings and brought well-being sacrifices. The people sat down to eat and drink and then got up to celebrate. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Hurry up and go down. Your people, whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt, are ruining everything. They've already abandoned the path that I commanded. They have a metal bull calf for themselves. They bowed down to it and offered sacrifices to it and declared, 'These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt.' The Lord said to Moses, 'I've been watching these people. I've seen how stubborn they are. Now leave me alone. Let my fury burn and devour them. Then I'll make a great nation out of you.' But Moses pleaded with the Lord, his God, 'Lord, why does your fury burn against your own people, whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt with great power and amazing force? Why should the Egyptians say, he had an evil plan to take the people out and kill them in the mountains, and so wipe them off the earth? Calm down your fierce anger. Change your mind about doing terrible things to your own people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, whom you yourself promised, I'll make your descendants as many as the stars in the sky. And I've promised to give your descendants this whole land to possess for all time.' Then the Lord changed his mind about the terrible things he said he would do to his people." All right, there's a lot going on here. One observation that eluded me for many years to kind of help understand how did they fall so quickly, so fast, is right here. Maybe you noticed it, but they make this golden calf, and we often know this story as where the Israelites worshipped other gods. So they say, these are your gods who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. But there's a clue. So they think that they are worshiping the god or gods who brought them up out of the land of Egypt. That's interesting. But then even more telling, Aaron, the high priest at this moment, says tomorrow will be a festival to the Lord. And if you remember this, whenever you see Lord capitalized in the Hebrew Bible, it's actually a stand-in for the personal name of God, which is spelled with the consonants YHWH, Yahweh. And so he actually looks at all this, and Aaron, the high priest, announces that what they're doing is a festival to Yahweh. So it's actually more accurate to say this is not a moment of Israel just completely losing it and worshiping other gods. It's actually a moment of Israel worshiping Yahweh incorrectly. They were not supposed to create a golden image. There's a really interesting connection to this. You can look at the background in 1 Kings chapter 12. This is where the kingdom splits, and Jeroboam takes the northern Israel, and the first thing that he does is he sets up a bull in Dan and Bethel. So those are the northern and the southern most points of Israel, of the 10 tribes of Israel. And the image here is actually that on top of these bulls, they're not worshiping cows. They're actually worshiping, they think they're worshiping Yahweh, and the image might be something like, these are his chariots, his chariot going into battle. And so they would actually imagine like the giant legs of the deity standing on these two bulls as like this massive chariot going into battle. And so Dan and Bethel, the northern point and southern point of Israel, become kind of this moving throne room of the divine. And here you have the origins here. They think they're worshiping Yahweh, but they're doing it in a way that's actually inconsistent with what God has already declared and who he is. So that's kind of what's going on in the first part. And then God, the second part actually we get a glimpse of who this God actually is, and what is actually required. Not this worshiping of a golden calf to honor Yahweh, but what is actually required to be in relationship with this God. I love there's a bit of a play on words. God acts like a disgruntled parent for a little bit, where, you might say to your spouse, look what your child has done, in a moment of frustration or anger. And God starts, your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt are ruining everything. God is coming down and saying, I'm going to be married to my people. They are going to be my bride. And on their wedding night, they're already committing adultery with me. Your people are ruining everything. Moses doesn't take that lying down. He flips the narrative and he reminds God, no, Lord, where is it? Why does your fury burn against your own people, whom you brought out of the land of Egypt? It's like there's this nice interplay. And I think God is inviting Moses into this space. But Moses gets the cue and he says, no, Lord, it's your people. You brought them out. And so please change your mind about doing these terrible things to your servants. And sure enough, the Lord changes his mind. One of the key elements of the gospel, of the whole biblical story, as we get to know this God here, is that God is looking for a righteous intercessor. That's kind of the fancy term for it, but someone who can actually stand in the gap and plead on behalf of the nation, this nation who's going to keep messing up and keep falling away and keep rebelling and worshiping God all wrong, not only worshiping false gods, but worshiping the true God in the wrong way, the way of the northern tribes of Israel. This whole story is a story of how they were falsely worshiping Yahweh. It started right here, where they're doing it all the wrong way. But Moses pleads with the Lord his God. He stands in the gap. A little bit later, he actually says, if you're going to blot them out, blot me out too. And so we see this contrast of worshiping a God who's like riding on the bull, a chariot into battle, versus a God who's looking for a righteous intercessor to plead for the people on their behalf. And that's exactly what Moses does here. And God, he is always looking for a way to lean toward mercy. For me, the big challenge from this passage is to realize that the people thought they were worshiping Yahweh. In their mind, they had deluded themselves to thinking they were doing that. They weren't just going off the rails worshiping a bunch of other gods. They thought they were worshiping the God who brought them out of Egypt. And maybe the challenge, the reflection for us this week is to really take stock. Is there ways that my current worship of God is actually just as bad as worshiping a false god altogether? Are there ways that maybe we've lost the narrative, lost the focus of who this God really is? And then the good news at the back end of that is that even when we mess up, even when we don't get God right, because let's face it, none of us actually can fully understand who this God is. We're always grasping at something out of our reach. We have a righteous intercessor. We have someone who stands in the gap, pleading on our behalf and calling forth God's mercy so that we don't stand in judgment. And so that really, this passage brings those two together. We're always going to fall short, and yet we have a mediator, an intercessor that stands in our gap.